afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on ethical issues in data collection and analysis. So we know in social science, especially sociology, the data collected is on people's opinion, on their feelings, emotions, their everyday life. So many a time it is kind of we are going into a realm which is considered as private, or there is a lot of kind of concern about sharing certain information with an outsider or someone whom the respondent doesn't know. So it becomes very important that we as researchers are very open in terms of the data that we collect, even the process in terms of making the respondents aware of the purpose of the research, take their permissions, consent in terms of the data that we are collecting. So all this together makes it important to discuss the significance of ethical issues in data collection and analysis. So researchers must address ethical issues proactively when planning and conducting studies, because research inherently involves gathering information from or about individuals. Anticipating these issues is crucial not just for the integrity of the study, but also as an essential part of constructing a compelling and responsible research proposal. So whenever we are collecting data, it should be a two-way relations, that we are collecting for the purpose of a research, but at the same time the respondents should also kind of be aware of the problems or the concern which is being addressed. So ethical considerations serve to prevent misconduct, protect institutional reputation, and ensure that the study upholds rigorous standards. So there are certain kind of prevention of misutilization of information. So we cannot use individuals' personal information about their personal life, about their community openly in a public domain. So many a time we kind of use pseudonyms, we kind of not directly disclose the area that we are studying. Now this depends on the nature of the research that we are doing, or the universe which is under research. So it's kind of both, it's a balance between the conduct of the entire research process as well as this importance of maintaining the privacy and the if it is concerned the secret or any kind of secrecy in the process of research. So ethical responsibilities are kind of a wide range, but in order to kind of make the research follow certain standards, there are certain mandatory component of a strong proposal. And in this, the researcher need to first protect participant and build trust. So we as a researcher may need to make sure that the participant's identity is protected, and the respondent will share openly his or her opinion or any kind of information required only when there is a trust between the researcher and the respondent. Number two, promote the integrity of research and guard against misconduct that could damage their institutional reputation. Cope with new and complex ethical challenges. As technology is improving, and as we have better means of data collection, better techniques of data collection, there are more new ethical concerns which is emerging. So it is important that the researcher is aware of the complex ethical challenges that he or she would be facing in the process of data collection. Next, ethical challenges: navigating what information participant or researcher share and managing potential consequence of public disclosure. Next, ensure the research results are presented truthfully with full transparency about methods and finding. So it's not that the respondent says something else, we are able to collect a different kind of data and then we present a different set of data. So whatever has been recorded has to be presented as it is, in terms of no kind of maligning those data. And then there's a transparency. The entire process is open. So if we are going to record, say, an interview or a conversation with a respondent, it's important that the respondent is aware that his or her conversation is being recorded. So it has to be transparent, open, and at the same time protect the identity of the institution and the respondent. Another key challenge is respecting cultural sensitivity, values, and differences when conducting research across diverse so there are many study which would take into account different culture. Now we cannot as a researcher be biased to one culture over the other, or kind of consider any one particular culture as inferior. So we have to be sensitive and we have to respect the values and differences in conducting research. Another key ethical challenge is adapting ethical framework to new context, such as safeguarding subjects' privacy in internet-based research or when using digital data collection methods. Now we know that we need to kind of follow an entire framework or standards of ethical guidelines in terms of conducting research or collecting data for our research. Now at the same time, it's important that we integrate ethic in the research proposals itself. So not only when we are going to the field to collect data, but this ethic is an important part of the proposal. Right from the writing of the proposal, we need to be integrate the ethics in research. Now, addressing potential ethical challenges in proposals legitimizes the study design and assures reviewers that participants' dignity, confidentiality, and autonomy are prioritized. Proposals should include strategies of informed consent, confidentiality, protection, data security, and managing potential conflicts of interest. So the researcher has to be aware and kind of take into consideration all these factors before he or she actually goes into the field for data collection. These ethical considerations demonstrate that the research process extends beyond conceptual and methodological planning. It necessitates ongoing vigilance and reflexibility to uphold standards and trust within the research community. Because once this research is kind of shattered or people become kind of suspicious of the research, then the entire data, the authenticity of the data would kind of be affected. And since it's kind of subjective opinion, subjective feelings, emotions that are being captured, people, if they are not very confident in the ways in which the data would be used, then there could be kind of fabrication. So it's very important to kind of be at the beginning, be very clear, take consent, ensure that the confidentiality is going to be maintained, build the trust with the respondent. Only then the data collection would be kind of be successful. So these ethical considerations demonstrate that the research process extends beyond conceptual and methodological planning. It necessitates ongoing vigilance, reflexibility to uphold standards and trust within the research community. In the literature, ethical issues arise in discussion about codes of professional conduct for researchers and in commentaries about ethical dilemmas and their potential solutions. Many national associations have published standards or code of ethics on their websites for professionals in their field. For example, we see the first website that would give us the standard is Ethical Principles of Psychologists and Code of Conduct, written in 2002, available at www.apa.org. Here you'll see the entire ethical guideline is mentioned. The another organization that details the standards for maintaining code of conduct is the American Sociological Association Code of Ethics, adopted in 1997, and it's available on the website www.asa.net.org. The third is American Anthropological Association Code of Ethics, approved in June 1998, and it's available online on www.aaanet.org. The fourth is American Educational Research Association Ethical Standards of American Educational Research Association, published in 2002, available at www.aera.net. The fifth is American Nurses Association Code of Ethics for Nurses provisions, approved in June 2001 and available at www.ana.org. So, all these guidelines are in the public domain, So, the standards, the code of conduct that a researcher needs to follow are available, and many a time if we are doing research on behalf of these organizations and we do not follow the code of conduct, then the research may not be accepted and the proposal can also be rejected by these bodies. So, one is that we are kind of aware of the research ethical dilemmas. We are categorically mentioning it in the research proposal, and then next is ethical issues in the research problem. Ethical consideration profoundly influence the selection of a research problem, guiding researchers to choose topics that genuinely address significant issues and benefit study participants rather than just serving the researcher's interest. This aligns with Hesse-Bibber and Levy's prompt for researchers to reflect on how ethic factors into the very framing of their work. Researchers should choose problems that hold potential benefit for those being studied and for society at large, ensuring that research holds value beyond personal academic interest. And this becomes very important because we are not going to the field to just kind of fulfill our personal interest. It has to be for the benefit of the society. It has to be a research problem is being studied, so there has to be certain kind of findings. Based on those findings, a solution of the problems or policies are going to be framed. So, the respondents should also kind of be aware that certain research is beneficial to the community, and that will again push the respondents towards building trust with the researcher. So, what is the role of participatory research ethic? According to principles outlined by Punch, the selection problem must be meaningful and responsive to the needs or well-beings of the target community or group, not merely convenient for the researcher. Action and participatory research approaches emphasize partnership and shared decision making with the explicit ethical aim of avoiding further marginalization of disempowerment of participants. Ensuring that the research process is not extractive or exploitative is central to ethical research design, especially when working with vulnerable communities. So, we need to kind of follow certain practical strategy to address ethical concern. Conducting pilot projects, a pilot project is a kind of trying to understand the field before we actually go on for the field work or data collection. It's kind of a preliminary field work, and this allows researcher to build rapport, trust and mutual respect with participants before the study begins. It's just kind of becoming more familiar with your field, and at the same time the respondents should become familiar with the researcher, because it's kind of, you need to build that rapport, you need to build a trust with the respondent. And in most research, a pilot project or a preliminary field work kind of functions to build this trust between the two. Now, these pilots help detect and rectify any unintended marginalization or adverse power dynamic in advance, leading to more ethical and inclusive study design. In sum, ethical thinking shapes not only how a study is conducted, but also what gets studied in the first place, ensuring research is socially responsible and genuinely beneficial. Now, the next when we talk about ethics is to talk about ethical issues in the purpose and questions. When crafting the purpose statement and central research question, it is critical for researchers to clearly and honestly communicate the aim of the study to participants. Transparency in intentions builds ethical foundation for the relationship between the researcher and the participants, reducing the risk of misunderstanding or ethical breaches. Deceptions arise when participants are misled about the true purpose of the study. Such practices breach ethical standards by violating participants' right to informed consent. So, if you have told the wrong objective, you don't want to tell the respondent, then that's a kind of a deception. And this deception arises when participants are misled about the true objective of the research. So, Sarantakos in 2005 published article emphasized that the intention and scope of research must be described honestly and explicitly to participants, ensuring they are fully aware of why and how they are involved. Avoiding deceptions fosters respect and safeguards participants' autonomy within the research process. Clearly stating who is sponsoring or funding the research builds trust and enhances the credibility of the study, especially in survey research using cover letters or consent forms. So, it's not only the kind of the researcher's proposal and the problem statement, it's also the affiliation institution. So, it has to be very clear that the research is being done for certain for the part of as a part of certain institutional goals, or it is being sponsored by a particular. So, all the information should be actually shared with the respondent, so that there is no scope for deception. There is no the entire process is transparent. So, when we talk about funding and sponsorship, it's kind of again important to disclose who are the funders, who is the sponsors. So, disclosing sponsorship allows participants to access any potential conflict of interest, biases or motivation guiding the research, which is crucial for ethical integrity and for informed decision making by the participants. Proposals and related communications, that is cover letter for mail surveys, should always state the research purpose and sponsorship transparently to develop a sense of accountability and legitimacy. This ethical practice is essential in establishing participants' trust, obtaining genuine consent, and maintaining research credibility. So the research has to be kind of an organized activity. It's not a personal desire to know something or personal intervention into problem. It's a kind of a part of a systematic, organized work which project, and therefore consent, transparency, accountability and legitimacy of the data collection is important. So, during the data collection process phase, researcher must prioritize respect for participants and research site while carefully addressing multiple ethical considerations to protect all involved. Institutional Review Board, that is IRB, review is a critical mechanism designed to safeguard participants' rights and welfare, especially under federal regulations. Researchers must avoid placing participants at any risk, taking special care with vulnerable population and others with specific needs. So, especially say we are trying to do a research say among the poor community or those who are kind of begging, we need to be very ensure that in the process of the data collection, they don't get targeted or they kind of not part of the rules and regulations, and no problems is created for them. If we look into the IRB, Institutional Review Board, what is the role of this board, we see that the respect for participants includes recognizing their autonomy, confidentiality, and the right to refuse or withdraw without penalty during research activities. So, if I as a respondent don't want to be a part of that research, or I don't want to answer the questions shared with the researcher, I have the right, I have the freedom to withdraw from it, and the researcher cannot coerce or cannot kind of fine me for not being a part of the research process. So, the Institutional Review Board serves as a formal oversight committee that review research proposal to assess potential harm and risk exposed to participant. Researchers submit detailed protocol describing the procedure and participant demographics to facilitate this evaluation and ensure compliance with ethical and legal standard. So, one of the important component of ethical issues is the informed consent, because the informed consent acts as an ethical safeguard. And what is an informed consent? It is basically a written consent by the respondent that he or she has no objection in being part of the research process. So, this informed consent has now become mandatory, clearly outlining participants' rights, study purposes, procedures, risk and protection. Signing this form affirms that the participant understands their involvement and consent voluntarily, reinforcing ethical transparency and trust. By adhering to these ethical protocols during data collection, researchers uphold the integrity of their studies while safeguarding human dignity and rights in research process. What are the elements of these consent? According to Sarantakos, the elements of consent form include the following. First, identification of the researcher, who is the researcher, with which institution he or she is affiliated, his designation, address, everything. Identification of the sponsoring institution. Third, indication of how the participants were selected. You know, the important question is why I should be a respondent. Why are you asking me a question? So, it is important to kind of explain the process by which the participant has been selected as a respondent. Fourth, identification of the purpose of the research. Fifth, identification of the benefits for participating. Sixth, identification of the level and type of participant involved. 7, notation of risk to the participant. So, when we look into these elements of the consent, we see that it guarantees confidentiality to the participant and assurance that the participants can withdraw at any time. Researcher must recognize that while confidentiality is a cornerstone of ethical research, some participants may wish to openly identified, especially in cases where owning the experiences align with the values or advocacy. Allowing participants to choose whether or not to remain anonymous supports their autonomy and voice in research. So, we need to balance confidentiality and participants' autonomy. So, if the participants desires that the identity is disclosed, the researcher should compile with this. Granting participants the option to forego confidentiality lets them maintain agency and ownership over their narrative. This practice is particularly relevant in participatory, activist or community-based research, where individuals may want recognition for their perspectives or contribution. Researchers have an ethical duty to fully inform participants about the potential consequences of being identified, such as unexpected exposure in published findings or risk if sensitive information becomes part. So, the permission or the consent basically acts as a gatekeeper. Once you have taken that consent, written consent, there is a surety on both the side of the respondent and the researcher that the ethical standards are going to be maintained. So, the entire ethical standards have today become very important, because there is a complex nature of research that social science engaged in, and the quality and the authenticity of the research depends on the level of ethical principles we adopt in the process of doing research. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.